We are discussing the design document guidelines for data platform. We are into the fourth section, which is design principles. In our previous videos, we have seen sections like the initial background and overview, as well as the design considerations. Today, we'll discuss about the design principles. So, for first, why do you need design principles, right? While building any platform, right? Not just data platform. Why do we need a design principle? So, design principles help us to define a common rule or common standard that everyone can follow. Okay. So, consider there are various development teams, right? There are small modules, and there are 4 or 5 different teams, and they are trying to write some data into a particular bucket within S3 bucket and a particular folder within that. So, the naming conventions, right? It can differ from teams to team. So, you need to have a common standard that all the teams can follow. So on a similar lines, design principles, right, gives you such common standards that every team can follow. Not just the naming standard, but the overall implementation standards, right? That's why we need design principles. It can help you to build the common standards across various teams, and not just the development team, across the various teams that are part of this overall program. Now, how do you define the design principles, right? So when you're designing any system, um, as mentioned earlier, right, the design considerations are the main thing to come up with the design. And when you are compiling your design, right, design principles form the fundamentals of this design. But then, how do you define the principles? So now, I've highlighted here 4 or 5 different topics or pillars based on which you can do that. These are based on, again, the if you have been working on AWS, you would know there are the 5 pillars, and I think now there are 6 pillars based on which any design is implemented. So I based this document on similar ones, but again, this is not the only pillars. Uh, you can think about any other pillars that you want while building your design. But these are just the guidelines. Again, you can use this as a reference, but customize it as per your needs. So, what are the different pillars? These are like the cost optimizations, your operational excellence, your performance improvement, uh, your reliability, right, when you are building the system, and finally, data security. So, you can consider data security and governance as well. So, I've divided into these pillars, again, inspired from the AWS 5 pillars when we build an ecosystem within AWS. So, what are the best practices that you should follow, right, while doing this? So let's talk about cost optimization. Okay, so whenever you are building any system, you should have a right balance between your cost and performance, right? There is always a trade-off between a cost and performance. You don't want to build a system which is best in class, but then the cost of running it really high, which is not sustainable, right? So an important design principle is always to ensure that you have the right balance between your cost and performance. You Now some of the guidelines that I've mentioned here are you can provision only for the capacity that is required. You don't start with a very high ended cluster. You can always start small and then scale up. Other one is you should look at pausing the cluster or stopping the cluster. So as a design principle, right, you can mention in a document that uh, provision only a cluster when it is really required. Don't just keep running the cluster all the time. That this will ensure that you have your cost in check. Similarly, if you go towards the pillar for operational excellence, the important thing is to log everything. So have a design principle saying that, okay, whatever component you are using, whichever service you are using, maybe in AWS, Azure, GCP, right? Anything, ensure that you have logging enabled, and you are monitoring continuously, doing all the required auditing. You are capturing the statistics, like how many records came in, how many really got loaded into the targets. Second is automate all your deployments. Have a strategy for your CI/CD pipelines. Maybe to start with, it might be difficult, but at least have a strategy for automating your deployments. These should not be manual. There should be some automation involved. Build you reusable generic frameworks, right? Especially for data ingestion or even for data loads. have reusable frameworks. If you can build something like which is based on metadata based ingestion framework, nothing like that. So see if you can do that. So have these are design principles, right, that you should always try to have a better system which can help you to achieve excellence from operational perspective also. Third, again, very important one is the performance improvements. How would you do a continuous performance improvement, right? And again, it's not an afterthought. It has to be done at the start, at the design level itself. So think about the performance right during the design phase. So when you're documenting when you're creating your design document, see like what all performance challenges may appear, based on the data volume, based on the past experience, and design the system accordingly. To give an example, right, when you are ingesting some data from some external sources, right, and it is a daily load, or even these are micro batches, you're running it at every hour, and if the data volumes are very high, it may not help if your data ingestion itself taking like 45 minutes, right? You want to complete the batch within an hour. So have a look at these things, consider how performance can be improved, how you can scale out, how you can do the things concurrently. Next is system reliability. Always have your backups and services as highly available. Provision for the backups, take the required snapshots. Again, keep this automated, right? Don't do it manual. So these pillars, right? You have to look across as well. Like we have had automation as one of the important points in our operational excellence pillar. When it comes to system reliability, right, try to apply these principles across these pillars. It's not that you just have to provision for backups, but it should be also be an automated ones. Have a sound DR strategy. So even if your workspace or your service fails within a region, can you always fall back during such times when you have to invoke your DR systems. Possible to build self-healing system, go for that. Again, it's not an easy thing to do, but at least have the proper backups and the failover systems where you can move to if you cannot self-heal the running system. Finally, data security. Security should be at the core of everything. So your data principle or your main design principle should be that you should protect your data wherever it is, right? Whether the data is stored, it is at rest, whether it is in transit, it is moving across the systems, whether it is within the same cloud provider, across the cloud providers, whether you are using internet or intranet or private links, right? Data should always be protected, and not just when it is arrested or moving, even when it is being used, when it is accessed. So ensure that you have these mentioned as your design principles. Based on this, then you can take a call when you're designing your solution, right? How do you protect your data? Whether it's at rest, do you need to encrypt it when it is being accessed? Can you do some dynamically masking? Do you need to tokenize the data, right? There are multiple ways to do that. So these are all the design principles. Once you lay out these, right, it will help you to come up with a proper design. So design considerations and design principles, these two together would help you to come up with your design. So the next section would be tech solution, right, which we'll see in the next video. To arrive to that, to conclude on the design, right, you need to have all these things in place, so that these can be considered while building the system. And as I said at the start, right, so these are just 4 to 5 pillars which I have mentioned here, but it is not limited to this. Your design principles can be across various things. If you're using things like data mesh and all, then data mesh has its own different principles. You will have to include them as well to ensure that you are following right, the decentralization strategy, the common teams for building data platforms, and the other principles of data mesh. Similarly, if you're building something like lakehouse, right, you need to follow those principles as well. Like you don't want to build a warehouse, you need to have a logical warehouse. All the data will reside only in the lake. So all those design principles should be documented. So it's again, this is just a reference which I'm telling you. Every project, every use case is different based on what you are trying to build. this section will have to document all those things, and it's a very important section because it's going to help you to bring in that uniformity within your implementation. So give special focus on design considerations and design principles. Only then you would be able to come up with the proper design which can help in your implementation phase.